New developments in the Epstein files fallout. A third federal judge has now rejected the Trump administration's request to make grand jury documents from the case public. New York federal judge Richard Berman wrote in his ruling, quote, the government's 100,000 pages of Epstein files and materials dwarf the 70-odd pages of Epstein grand jury materials. Judge Berman then goes on to say that the motion appears to be a diversion from the breadth and scope of the Epstein files that the government already has in its possession. Barbara, there was always going to be a high bar to get these grand jury testimonies in the first place. And then there was also the underlying fact of what the judge is basically saying here, which is that this is not the there that the Epstein files folks want. The DOJ already has that in their possession. They don't need the courts for this.
Yes, in my opinion, this effort to get grand jury material disclosed for the public was always simply a fig leaf. It was a distraction from the request for the Epstein files. In an effort to appear transparent, you may recall Donald Trump directed Pam Bondi via Truth Social post to unseal the grand jury transcript. And then she said, I will file a motion to get those unsealed. Every prosecutor in America could have told you the judges will reject this motion because grand jury secrecy rules prohibit it. So it was never going to be disclosed. The other thing every prosecutor in America could have told you is exactly what this judge has said, which is the grand jury portion of this case is a sliver of the entire investigative file. Most often, grand jury witnesses are federal agents who summarize the details of their investigation for a grand jury because, unlike a trial, at grand jury, hearsay testimony is permitted. So in the interest of efficiency, an agent will typically just give a summary. And so I'm not surprised to hear that there are only 70 pages of grand jury material in this case. The real evidence, the real smoking gun, if it exists, is going to be in the documents. Photos, videos, messages, other documents or records. And that is what I think Congress really wants to receive here, to disclose, to find out what is there, if there is anything being concealed.
Yeah, you're doing my job for me here, Barb, because this is happening in the backdrop of congressional subpoenas for those exact files. The DOJ is expected to turn over those files to the House Oversight Committee tomorrow. What are you watching for? And for me, the politics of this is once Republicans get them, I think it's going to be hard for them to say that they're the ones who are now stopping them from being released. But that's maybe a separate question.
Yes, I will be watching to see how forthcoming the Justice Department really is. Are they truly going to give over every document they have? Oftentimes they will say things like, we have policies to protect the privacy interests of victims and subjects. That's legitimate. And there is usually what's called the accommodation and negotiation process that goes forward, where DOJ offers a certain amount of material. Congress pushes back and asks for a little more, and ultimately they reach some sort of compromise about what they're going to receive. It'll be interesting to see here how much Congress demands in light of the fact that there's been such a keen interest in the Epstein files here. And ultimately, it could come to a lawsuit before a court to require full disclosure of these files. So I'll be watching to see how forthcoming the Justice Department really is. I think they're, at the moment, talking a good game, but we'll see if they follow through.
And Democrats on the Oversight Committee that I've spoken to say that they're not expecting full transparency here. They know they've got a fight on their hands. We're going to be watching it as it unfolds. Barbara McQuade, thank you for coming on with us.